Welcome to the Prickle. This is the Live Free or Die debate series, which was founded about 3 years ago, actually, at the Shell by Frank Natali and Dennis Pratt. Frank would actually be moderating today, but he's feeling under the weather, so you're stuck with me. The resolution is racism and libertarianism are inconsistent. Now we're going to have there's some notes. This debate will not be on whether race is a thing or on race at all, but on ethnic groups, and we must define racism as well. So what is racism? How do we define it? So racism defined is prejudice, discrimination, or antagonism by an individual, community, or institution against a person or people on the basis of their membership in a particular racial or ethnic group, typically one that is minority or marginalized. Like I said, this is not going to be on race, but on ethnic groups. Some caveats. This debate centers on philosophy. This is not a debate on pragmatism or legal theory. This is specifically philosophy and doesn't pertain to any private organizations. In particular, the FSP, which does have an anti-racism plank. So, the debate will be structured in this way. We're going to have two 15-minute opening statements, two 7-minute rebuttals, a 40-minute question and answer, which includes questions from the participants to each other, and from the moderator to the participants, and to the crowd, to these people. And during that time, please come to this mic when you want to ask a question. And then we're going to have 5-minute closing arguments. Before, you all should have voted. Hopefully everybody has voted yes, no, or undecided. And then at the end of the debate, when it's culminated, everybody's going to vote again, yes, no, or undecided. And the one that changes the most minds wins. It's Oxford style. So let's introduce the participants. For the affirmative is Jason Sorens. Jason is a senior fellow at AIER, American Institute of Economic Research. He is the founder of the Free State Project and board member. He got his PhD from Yale in 2003, has published 20 peer-reviewed essays, has written a book on secessionism, and has been a professor at Dartmouth, Yale, and St. Anselm. Des Pratt is arguing for the negative. Dennis has written 2,000 essays and was the top essayist at Quora before he was deplatformed. He has been a strong FSP participant. He founded the Shell, is an owner of the Independence Inn, was famously the head of PorkFest for several years, and had the best attendance ever. He's done a lot of other activism like right to die legislation, and is a defender of LPNH. So, without further ado, we are going to start the debate, and Jason Sorens will go first. He has 15 minutes to give his side of the argument.
Testing. All right. Well, first let me say I'm just very pleased to have this opportunity to debate this issue in a calm and logical and reasonable manner, and not through a string of online ad hominem. So it's great to have the venue to do this. When I told my boss that I was going to debate this topic, he's a longtime friend, but he said, I love you, but depending on what you say, I may have to let you go. And I said, don't worry. I'm going to say everything reasonable here. So I am defending the affirmative, that libertarianism and racism are inconsistent. Now, you might think my job's an impossible one here because obviously there are racist libertarians, so debate over, right? But that's not what we're debating. What we're debating is whether the belief in libertarianism is consistent with the behavior of racism. So definitions for this debate, we already went through the definition of racism. So the prejudice, the antagonism, the discrimination on the basis of race, any one of those three could qualify as racism. I'm not really going to focus on the prejudice or antagonism part of that because I don't really know what's going on in people's heads. I want to focus on people's behavior. So breaking down discrimination on the basis of race, I'm just going to think about that very simply as treating someone worse than you otherwise would because of their race, right? And I'm going to contend that that is inconsistent with libertarianism. And I guess we might not be fully agreed on the definition of libertarianism, but hopefully we can work that out. I think that's inconsistent with libertarianism under any standard definition of libertarianism. So let's say you define libertarianism as the non-aggression principle or the maximum equal liberty principle. Like you have the maximum liberty to act consistent with the like liberty of everyone else, right? That's the maximum equal liberty principle. You could define libertarianism that way. You could define it really as the belief that government or the legal system for you ANCAPs out there should simply protect individuals' rights to life, liberty, and property. That's another definition of libertarianism. Under any of those kind of standard definitions of libertarianism, I'm going to say that racism is inconsistent with libertarianism. Now, if we just stipulate a definition of libertarianism to be, the principles of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, then debate over. I concede, right? Okay, racism is consistent with that. But let's use a standard definition of libertarianism. Okay. So how is libertarianism inconsistent with racism? It might seem that they're obviously consistent because libertarianism just says don't violate people's rights. Racism doesn't necessarily violate people's rights. So obviously racism can be consistent with libertarianism. And I want to concede that, racism doesn't necessarily violate people's rights. And there are even cases where racism doesn't directly harm anyone in the usual sense. So like if I bake cookies for people in my office, but I don't give one to the Lakota guy because I hate Native Americans and, no cookie for a Native American, right? That's racism because I'm treating the person worse than I otherwise would because of his race. And I would say that that's wrong, but he doesn't have a right to a cookie. I haven't directly harmed him. I just haven't given him a thing. Or here's another example, affirmative action. All right, so let's say a private college decides that it's going to discriminate against Asians, and many of them have done so. They're going to deny admission to an Asian applicant because that applicant is Asian. So that's discrimination on the basis of race. So I would say affirmative action is racist, even though no one has a right to a college admission. And by denying admission to someone, you aren't actually directly harming them. You're just not giving them a benefit. Okay, so racism, treating people worse than you otherwise would because of their race. Now, can we say that a choice or a pattern of behavior is inconsistent with a worldview? Yeah, I think clearly we can. So let's say you're a Christian. Is adultery consistent with Christianity? I mean, clearly there are adulterous Christians out there, so in that sense, yes, but I think there's a very meaningful sense and a very ordinary and reasonable sense in which we would say it's inconsistent to be a Christian and commit adultery because your belief system forbids adultery. So I'm going to say in the same way, libertarianism is inconsistent with racism because our belief system is going to imply that we shouldn't behave in a racist way. Here's another fun example. If you're someone who says that you care about liberty more than anything else in the world and you want to live in a free society no matter what, and you don't live in New Hampshire, is that inconsistent? I would say so. Like if you value liberty that much, you should move here. All right. So libertarianism and racism are inconsistent precisely the same way. Racist behavior contradicts the principles that underlie libertarianism. Now, you might expect me to say here something like libertarianism is an individualist philosophy, racism is collectivist, so it's inconsistent to treat people in a collectivist way while believing in an individualist philosophy, that, that you should treat people as individuals, judge them as individuals. And that's right. That argument is fine. That's a good argument, but it actually doesn't go far enough. The problem is deeper. So I'll start investigating that problem by asking a question for you all to think about. That question is, why do you believe in libertarianism? So why do you believe that you shouldn't aggress against other people? Or why do you believe that everyone deserves the maximum liberty consistent with a like liberty of all? Or why do you believe that government should respect your rights and protect them? Right? Why do you believe those things? Now, if you think about it, presumably the answer to that has to have something to do with what we owe to people in particular. All right, so if I find a rock on the ground, can I aggress against that rock? Does it make sense to initiate force against a rock? If I throw a rock, am I, doing something immoral or evil? No, clearly not. You can't initiate force against a rock. If I bite a plant, have I committed aggression? No. Right? So libertarianism is a philosophy for people because people have some kind of moral value, some kind of value that we want to uphold that rocks and plants don't have. Maybe some people would say higher animals too. I'm not going to get into that. But at minimum, there's something specific about people that makes us deserve respect, deserve to have our rights respected. So what distinguishes a person from a rock? Now, a glib answer might be, we have Homo sapiens DNA. Well, that's not a very satisfactory answer because imagine that there were intelligent aliens out there, right? And these intelligent aliens were on the same level as us in terms of their moral capacity, their capacity to understand moral obligations, their capacity to reason, their consciousness, however you want to understand that. Then I think we would say it'd be wrong to aggress against those aliens, too. It'd be wrong to take their rights, to violate their rights. So it's clearly not human DNA that somehow gives us moral value. There's something more to it. Maybe it's our consciousness. Maybe it's our capacity to engage in moral reasoning. Maybe it's our capacity for free will. Maybe it's the fact that we have a soul. I'm not going to get into that, like which one of those things it is, but think about it for you. What is it about human beings that gives us our moral dignity, that gives us our rights? So libertarians, more than anyone else out there in the world, believe in the sacred dignity of every individual human being, and we would never sacrifice that dignity to the whims of even a majority, even a very large majority, right? We cannot sacrifice the individual. One way we respect that sacred dignity of other people is to respect their rights, right? Not to aggress against them, allow them to exercise their liberties. But respecting their rights isn't the whole of our moral obligation to other people. It can't be. Because if humans have some capacity that gives them rights, then not only do we have to respect those rights, but we should respect and honor the capacity that gives them those rights. So if I repeatedly shout insults and epithets at someone without provocation, for no reason, have I done that person wrong? Is that a wrong thing to do? Should we teach our children not to do that? Let's assume I've not violated their rights in doing so. Still, even if I'm respecting their rights, it seems that I am denigrating and disrespecting someone's humanity by belittling and harassing them. So it does seem like a good example of disrespect, right? So if we have this duty to respect someone's rights, we also have a duty not to deny their common humanity with us, not to denigrate their dignity. So racism is another example of disrespect. When I treat someone worse because of his race, I'm disrespecting his common humanity. I'm saying you have this arbitrary characteristic that distinguishes you from the rest of us humans, and I'm going to treat you worse because of it. I'm treating him not as a person, but a mere thing. Violating someone's rights, taking away his freedom, isn't the only way to do someone wrong. You can do someone wrong by denying through your actions that person's humanity. So now, whatever you think of Martin Luther King Jr., he has a good explanation of how racism is degrading. So I have a short quotation here from his letter from Birmingham City Jail. Okay. I guess it is easy for those who have never felt the stinging darts of segregation to say, wait. But when you have seen vicious mobs lynch your mothers and fathers at will and drown your sisters and brothers at whim, when you have seen hate-filled policemen curse, kick, brutalize, and even kill your black brothers and sisters with impunity, when you see the vast majority of your 20 million Negro brothers smothering in an airtight cage of poverty in the midst of an affluent society, when you suddenly find your tongue twisted and your speech stammering as you seek to explain to your 6-year-old daughter why she cannot go to the public amusement park that has just been advertised on television, and see tears welling up in her little eyes when she is told that Funtown is closed to colored children, and see the depressing clouds of inferiority begin to form in her little mental sky, and see her begin to distort her little personality by unconsciously developing a bitterness toward white people. When you have to concoct an answer for a 5-year-old son asking in agonizing pathos, "Daddy, why do white people treat colored people so mean?" When you take a cross-country drive and find it necessary to sleep night after night in the uncomfortable corners of your automobile because no motel will accept you. When you are humiliated day in and day out by nagging signs reading white and colored. When your wife and mother are never given the respected title Mrs. When you are harried by day and haunted by night by the fact that you are a Negro living constantly at tiptoe stance, never knowing what to expect next and plagued with inner fears and outer resentments. When you are forever fighting a degenerating sense of nobodiness, then you will understand why we find it difficult to wait. Treating people in a racist fashion, even when you're not violent, still disrespects their humanity. And it's inconsistent to be a libertarian and disrespect the humanity of others. Now, racist libertarians will go on and say and accuse me of favoring forced integration. Nothing could be further from the truth. You have a right to treat others with disrespect, so long as you don't violate their rights. But you shouldn't do it anyway. There are many examples of disrespectful wrong behavior that libertarians should not engage in, even though they are quote-unquote peaceful. Here's one I use with my college students. Never calling your mom. Okay? So if you never call your mom, is that okay? I mean, assume she's a normal mom. You have a normal relationship. She's not abusive or whatever, right? Is it wrong to completely cut your mom out of your life? I would say so. You shouldn't do that. You shouldn't do that. But should the cops come and punish you for it? Of course not. So that, there's an example of something that's not unjust, doesn't violate someone's rights, but it's still wrong. Anyone here ever hear of Adam Smith? Wealth of Nations. All right. I got this one from him. Ingratitude to a benefactor. So someone helped you in a big way in life, gave you your big break. Now you're wealthy and powerful, and your benefactor has fallen on hard times. He comes to you, broken down, not knowing where else to turn, asking for a helping hand. Instead of helping him, you say, "I got mine, now go F yourself. Security, escort this man out." All right. Have you acted wrongly by being ungrateful and mean to your benefactor? I would say yes, you should not have done that. You've disrespected him. If you're going to be a libertarian who believes in the rights of all people, you have to respect not only everybody's rights, but everybody's moral dignity. Treating people with disrespect is inconsistent with libertarianism. Racism is a way of treating people with disrespect. Therefore, racism is inconsistent with libertarianism. That's it. Your mic.
I'm impressed. How did you finish that?
All right. Thanks, Jason. Up next will be Dennis Pratt.
There we go.
For the negative.
Thank you. So we're going to be talking a little bit about whether racism and libertarianism are consistent or inconsistent.
And, I have the task of saying that they are consistent. So I'm certainly not going to be saying anything about how, racism is necessary. I'm not going to be saying that libertarians are more racist or less racist. I'm not going to say that you have to like racists, associate with racists, work with racists, trade with racists. Because I would actually join Jason on that. Those are absurd positions. No, but tonight I have a much easier task, and that's just to say, that the hyper tolerant libertarianism that we're a part of actually has a room for hyper intolerant attitudes such as racism. Now, this shouldn't be too hard. Walter Block kind of went through in the 70s all the defending the undefendables. And he made economic arguments for that they had roles in the free market, or that the market would actually fix them and correct them. And I could actually follow his lead there and say, we don't want to socialize the cost of racism. We want the racists to bear the costs, the personal, associative, and market costs, and we want the non-racists to bear the benefits. But this is supposed to be a talk about philosophy. And in libertarianism actually touches a large number of the branches of philosophy, none more so than ethics. And the ethics of libertarianism, a lot of people think that starts with the non-aggression principle or property rights. The trouble is that then has to be axiomatically believed. You have to just believe it on faith that you have property rights. So you have to believe it on faith that there's a non-aggression principle. There's actually a more fundamental belief, which is self-ownership. And there are performative contradictions that actually support self-ownership. For example, how do you use your body to argue that you cannot use your body? And you can derive the NAP and property rights from there. So what I'm really going to be focused on today is racism consistent with ethics, with libertarian ethics, as in self-ownership. Now, we already heard the definition, and the definition included prejudice. Jason kind of threw away, he said, hey, you don't have to worry about it. And I kind of agree. Prejudice is something that happens inside your brain. If we actually have a philosophy that is based on self-ownership, where does the thought of prejudice occur? It's inside your head. It's inside your body. Self-ownership. That's consistent with libertarianism. It's inside your brain, the cells, the chemical processes. These are all inside of you, and therefore you own it, and that is totally consistent. As a matter of fact, it would only be inconsistent if somebody tried to stop you from thinking racist thoughts. So you have consistent being racist and inconsistent trying to stop someone from being prejudiced. The second part was discrimination. And the first place that I'd like to talk a little bit about that is discrimination in association. Now, you not only own your body, but you can own it so that you can actually move it. You can move it everything where you want, and you can move it in concert with someone as long as they concur, as long as they consent. So if I want to associate with Jason, I could kind of go over and hang out, but if he says no, all of a sudden I have a choice, right? I can persist in trying to associate with him, or I can back off. And there's one that's consistent with libertarianism, and that is backing off. And there's one that's inconsistent, which is persisting and trying to still associate with them. It doesn't really matter why Jason's saying no. That's something that's inside his head. That's a thought of inside his head. There could be an infinite number of ways, including that he's a little bit more lily white than my olive skin. It doesn't matter. If I think, oh, geez, he's being racist, I should still force myself on him. That's inconsistent. Consistent is respecting his self-ownership and backing the F off. Well, what about discrimination for labor? So let's say that there's a large bough here from an unowned tree that has fallen, and I go over to Jason. I say, "Hey, Jason, pick up that limb and carve me a beautiful spear. I'll give you $200." Of course, he could say yes. And of course, that's consistent with libertarianism. I've asked using my body. He says yes using his body, and he can carve using his body. And we're totally consistent with libertarianism. As soon as he says no, I can't force him to do it. The only consistent thing there is to say, okay, I'm backing off. Why he did it doesn't matter to libertarianism. It just doesn't matter. All that matters is respect for the other person's self-ownership. There could be an infinite number of ways, but it also could be that he looked at Ancestry.com and found out that I have more Dakota blood in me than Pocahontas. Well, what about trade? You know, we're not talking about discrimination in labor, but what about discrimination in trade? He's actually carved out a whole bunch of spears. I go over to him and I say, "Hey, I want one of those spears." And he says, "No, I'm not going to sell it to you." Now, I can suspect he does it for racist reasons. But here's the trick that they try to do. They try to pretend that the property, that spear is absent the labor that he put into it. So when I asked him first over here, "Would you work for me?" We all agree. If I forced him to do that, that would be a slavery, right? I would be enslaving him. If I wait for him to actually carve that spear and say, "Oh, now you must sell it to me," it's still slavery. It's a retroactive enslavement, but I'm taking from him not just the bough of the tree. I'm taking from him the entire labor that he took to build that spear, the wear and tear on his body, his lifespan, and his life energy. And because he owns his own body, he may decide that he doesn't want to do that. Why? Irrelevant. He could do it because I'm ugly as sin. Doesn't matter. He could do it because he just kind of feels like he doesn't want to respect my dignity. Doesn't matter. Libertarianism is very, very thin ethic. And all it says is respect the other person's self-ownership. Now, antagonism, which is the third branch of that definition, and there's certainly the thought antagonistic, but there's also the kind of scorn and looking at him and sneering at him, and we all sneer at Jason all the time anyway. But you own your own body, and you can certainly sneer it however you want to at Jason. He may not like it. And he may think you're doing it because he is so lily white. But it doesn't matter. You can use your body as you choose. The last part is antagonism in words. And that's kind of really where we get into trouble, right? So, and he talked a little bit about, people kind of talking, being mean to people and that type of thing. Well, what is a word? A word is using your lungs, your stomach muscles to press out air through your throat, through your larynx, your tongue, and your mouth. Those are all parts of your body. So, the only consistent thing with libertarianism is to respect my body, no matter what the words are. You can disrespect the words. You can say, "Oh, I don't like those words. Those words are really terrible." But the inconsistent thing would be to try to control my body and try to prevent me from using my body to say those words. Now, this should actually make you a little bit uncomfortable. Oops. So, nothing in the definition of racism is inconsistent with libertarianism. Libertarianism with the philosophy of self-ownership. And you're going, "Oh, geez, are they saying that I have to be racist? And the anti-racist will say, oh no, well, racism actually causes people to act violently. And so that's what we're preventing. We're preventing those types of violent acts that will actually violate your self-ownership. And I totally agree. But it's not the thought that is violative. It is the action itself that is violative. And there's an infinite number of thoughts that could actually lead to violence. It could be you're just born that way, or you were educated to do it that way. You didn't get enough sleep. You got cut off on the highway. Your wife yelled at you. You're drunk. Or it could be any number of beliefs, including a racist belief. There's literally an infinite number of things that could cause you to violate someone's self-ownership. All we care about in libertarianism is that the self-ownership is either respected or it's violated. The reason doesn't matter. Now, libertarianism simply says that you own yourself, and you may control your own body. You may control your body's actions in labor and leisure and the product of it. And if some of those things have a racial component to it, that's your business. And it should make you a little bit uncomfortable because you're going, hey, I don't like that. I don't want to live like that. I don't want to be like that. I want actually to care about the dignity of man. But libertarianism is not a full-fledged philosophy of life. It's a very narrow philosophy. Oops, I lost myself. It sets a bar for the minimum behavior that we must follow to not be evil. So when you start violating someone's self-ownership, that's when you're evil, and that's when, in ethical terms, you may be used violence against. And commensurate violence could be used against you until you get over that bar. But once you pass over that bar, there's an infinite number of decisions for how you live your life. And some of those decisions are going to make you a mensch, and some of those decisions are going to make you an a-hole. But don't look to libertarianism to tell you, out of all those infinite types of behaviors, which ones to do. Look to the other types of philosophies and religions. Libertarianism is important not because it shows us how to be a good man. Libertarianism is important because it emphasizes how not to be an evil man. The biggest problems we face is that billions of people are committing actions today that we believe are evil. And they don't even realize it. In some cases, they think it's good. And it is our unique job as libertarians to define that minimum bar that every single human has a right to, respect of their self-ownership. Do not hit people. Don't take their stuff. And we leave it to other philosophies to handle all the other myriad aspects of life.
No, he's not done.
I'm done.
All right. Thank you, Dennis. So we're going to do the rebuttals now, and we're going to start with Jason. So you have 7 minutes to rebut Dennis.
Okay. All right. I disagree with almost nothing you said. So if someone doesn't want to associate with me for whatever reason, even bad reasons. I don't want to force myself on them. I don't want to force them to associate with me. If I see a clubhouse, no lily white libertarians allowed, I'm not going to try to join that clubhouse. But that's not the question before us. The question before us is whether libertarians, given our moral philosophy, should be excluding people on the basis of race. Should we be discriminating against people on the basis of race? And my claim is we should not, right? So libertarianism itself simply says don't violate rights. But all of us as libertarians need to have a broader moral framework to support that. You can't have that as your sole moral framework because it has no foundation. So let's take self-ownership. Dennis used that example. So, okay, we have rights in virtue of our self-ownership. We're all self-owners. Clearly, rocks are not self-owners. Plants are not self-owners. There's something about people that gives us that self-ownership. What is the thing that owns the self? I don't think it's just our bodies, right? Because it wouldn't make too much sense for the body to own itself. Like a corpse doesn't own itself. It's something like our mind, or maybe our soul, or our will. There's something there that is our driving decision maker, our chooser, that deserves respect, right? That is what owns the self. That is what should have freedom to act, to choose. Okay, so if we have this mind, will, or soul that deserves this freedom to choose and to act, then destroying or disrespecting that mind, will, or soul is also something we shouldn't do. Not only must we respect freedom, but we must respect the dignity of that person who enjoys that freedom, who's making those choices. So the question is not, should we force Fun Spot to let black children in? The question is, if you're a libertarian owner of Fun Spot, and you say, I believe strongly in the individual dignity of every self-owning human being, and you think to yourself, well, lots of people in my town are racist. They don't want me to let black kids in. Maybe my business would even do a little bit better if I didn't let black kids in. Should I not let black kids in? Is it perfectly consistent as a libertarian who strongly vindicates the rights and dignity of every individual human being to then say, yeah, I'm not going to let black kids in. I advertise no colored children allowed. I would say that is inconsistent, right? That behavior, that choice to denigrate the humanity of other people is inconsistent with anything that could lead you to libertarianism, right? Maybe there's some example, like I'm a libertarian because Satan told me so, and Satan also wants me to discriminate against black kids. Okay, all right. Then that kind of libertarianism is consistent with racism. But all the standard forms of libertarianism, like self-ownership, belief in the individual dignity of human people, if you believe that's the reason we have rights, is that we're self-owners, we have this individual dignity, this moral dignity that we should never disrespect, then that implies not only should we respect their rights, but we should respect their humanity. So Adam Smith actually uses this. It's a wonderful passage in the Theory of Moral Sentiments. He has this chapter where he talks about duties of beneficence, and this is where he talks about his the ungrateful benefactee, I guess, the person who has been given a gift, helped out in life, gotten their start from someone, and then turns on them and doesn't help them when they're in need. Smith uses this as an example of someone who has committed, yes, even evil. And he said we could even justly hate that kind of person, but he has not committed an injustice. And so duties of beneficence, like duties of gratitude, cannot be compelled. And only when you're violating someone's rights, he says, can you punish someone. And so he has this beautiful defense of basically libertarianism in this book. And it's not a libertarianism that has no foundations, has no other moral compass. It is built within a moral compass that says, yes, we have these duties of beneficence and gratitude. We have all sorts of duties. We have duties of friendship. We have duties of love and care for our children. right? But we also have these duties of justice that say, I can't violate anyone's rights. And so I have to say, yeah, I think there are things that we could do that are in fact evil and that we should never do, but that don't violate anyone's rights. And, I've given the example of the ungrateful person. I've given the example of never calling your mom. I mean, think about a parent who, let's say, is greatly disturbed and lacks the traditional parental love for their children and tells their children, you're evil. I hate you. You should kill yourself. Right? Imagine a parent who does something like that. How horrible. How evil. I don't hesitate to call that evil. Should that parent be punished for mere speech? Certainly if their child is an adult, no. That they haven't violated any rights. But could a libertarian ever consistently act in such a way? No. Yeah, I would say no. A libertarian cannot consistently act in that way. Libertarians should not denigrate and deny the common humanity of the people that we think have this glorious right to liberty. That glorious right to liberty also implies that we should respect them in other ways. All right, your mic.
So most libertarians want to overload libertarianism, to make it thick with other values. And they may be libertarian conservatives or libertarian progressives or libertarian woke or libertarian family values or libertarian virtue ethics. Now they share that core ethic with us of respecting self-ownership. But on top of that, they add these particular ideas of what it is to be a good man. And what it means to, what is required to create a good community. And you may agree or disagree with those. And I think that those are actually great ideas. But the mistake that they're making is that they're adding it to libertarianism. These are extra preferences that they want. They don't have to add it to libertarianism. And it doesn't belong in libertarianism. Libertarianism isn't the be-all, end-all philosophy. It defines what you must not do. Otherwise, you're evil. And it defines when violence may ethically be used against you. And that's a darn important thing to know. It's probably the most important thing because there's about 7 billion human beings today who are defining evil as good. And this is why libertarianism needs to be focused narrowly on self-ownership and not conflated with all these other great philosophies that some of them I'll agree with, some I won't agree with. And as a matter of fact, a lot of times Jason's arguing on Twitter and it's all about these other philosophies. It's not about libertarianism. Someone must set that minimum bar below which evil lies. And someone must advocate for bringing human beings up to at least that bar. And that is uniquely our job. It is what differentiates libertarianism from all the other great different philosophies. Once crossing that minimum bar and labeling all the other actions good or bad, or this makes you a mensch and this makes you an a-hole, holding the door open, tipping the hat, paying a good tip, being a good neighbor, or judging people not based on the color of their skin. That's the job of other philosophies. Libertarianism has a very important job, and it is just too busy trying to set and hold that minimum bar that no one else is holding. That's our job. We're too few. We're not encompassing all other philosophies. Now imagine the worst possible racist in the world. You have an image in your mind? Would you rather that person be an authoritarian or a libertarian? Right? As an authoritarian, he's going to use violence in order to enact his his racist thoughts. And he's going to be lobbying the ruler to force you to be part of his racism. But imagine the same guy as a libertarian. Well, yeah, he's still going to be a jerk. He's not going to employ people, and he's going to choose to associate with these people, and he's going to say disparaging things, but it's relegated to him. He cannot force it on you. Right? So and he's not going to use violence to force it on you. So I just hope that you can actually see that, not only is racism consistent with the very important job that we have, the unique job that we have of libertarianism, of setting that bar and holding that bar hard. You may not go beneath that bar, otherwise you're an evil SOB. It's consistent with that. But it's also something that is preferable. We want non-racist, but also racist to be libertarian. Because it would make a far better society, a less violent society, a society where they're not violating self-ownership. And we'd actually prefer every racist to be libertarian. And then once they get above that bar, right? Once they get above that authoritarian bar where they're abusing other human beings, send them to church. Send a pastor to them. Say, hey, there's a guy who dresses up in a hood, and go talk to him. But let's at least stop the violence. Let's just at least stop the violations of self-ownership. No one else is doing that. That's our job.
All right. We're going to open it up to questions, but so line up to the mic here. We're going to we'll go single file and ask and then answer your questions. But first, let's do the presenters have, or the debaters have, questions for each other. Let's start with that.
All right. Let's go with this one. Okay. So the owner of FunSpot comes to you, and he's...
FunSpot is actually a libertarian-owned place.
And they let everyone in. Okay, but you're the owner of the FunSpot from this example, and the owner, or you're not the owner, but the owner comes to you and says, "Okay, I'm a libertarian, but." I kind of dislike black people, and people in town also dislike black people. So I'm under this pressure, and I'm kind of leaning toward not letting black kids into FunSpot. But I have this worry. I'm just worried that might be the wrong thing to do. What do you think? How would you answer him?
I would answer him twofold. From a libertarian perspective, you have every right to do it. It is your body. It is your energy. It is your lifespan that is in FunSpot. And of course, you decide who goes in and who doesn't go in. My next question is, what are you in addition to being a libertarian? What type of other philosophy do you have to be a good man? For me, I'm kind of in your area. Virtue ethics. I mean, I actually think that that's the way that we ought to be treating human beings. We ought to be treating human beings with dignity. And it's important to me. And I actually can't go to sleep at night if I feel like I haven't treated someone well. So, I think it's a personal question. My concern as a libertarian is pretty well satisfied early on. My interest after that, though, is we can talk about all different types of traditions and all, and we could bring in different counselors and different personal growth people and pastors, and we could have a very interesting discussion. It's just not a libertarian discussion. So my question is a kind of along that line. Do you see a difference between, ethics, which is kind of that minimum bar that below which we can actually use violence, and morals, which would be, hey, this guy's a good man, this guy's a mensch, this guy's a jerk. We want to stay away from him, but we're not going to use violence against them, right? So do you see a need to have that distinction between that minimum level of behavior that we can actually start using violence there, and hey, this is how you really ought to act if you're going to be a good man?
Yeah, I think I was crystal clear about that. So I think there's I would call it justice and morality, right? So we can use force to punish injustice, violating people's rights. We can't use force to punish mere wrong acts that are not unjust, like never calling your mom, being ungrateful to your benefactor, and yes, not letting black kids into Fun Spot. Those are things that you should be allowed to do, but we should also condemn them as wrong.
And I guess my further question is, do you think that both of those lie within libertarianism?
No, I said that libertarianism simply says don't violate rights. That is the definition of libertarianism. Non-racism is not a part of libertarianism. It's logically implied by libertarianism in the same way that if you highly value liberty, and liberty is a key, liberty is the most important thing to you, then you should move to New Hampshire is logically implied by if liberty is really the most important thing to you. It'd be inconsistent. But it's not saying that moving to New Hampshire is part of your love of liberty. It's simply something that's logically implied. So non-racism is not part of libertarianism, but it's logically implied by it.
All right. I'm going to have moderator's prerogative and ask a question to each, and then we'll get to the questions of the audience. First, I'll start with you, Dennis, since everything's Jason first. What kind of encompassed in that question maybe is a racist believes that another group or something is lesser than human and maybe doesn't have the intelligence or capability to have real self-ownership. And this is kind of viewed in the Philippines and obviously. So what would you say about that? And in that, is that form of racism inconsistent?
So I would say that it's not inconsistent. For example, I think that way of Harvard graduates, that they don't actually, they're kind of a little bit beneath us. Where's Milo, right? Woo! But yeah, I think I think that we have judgments about people, and we have a myriad number of judgments. The question is whether we respect their self-ownership. That's the libertarian question. And then after that is, I like Jason's question. After libertarianism, do we treat them with dignity? Are we treating human beings with dignity? So I think that's a good gauge.
All right, I have a question to Jason. What about, let's say, discrimination in the dating market, or let's say you don't find a certain race attractive. Let's say you don't find Argentinians attractive. Or Argentinians, like, they're very arrogant people. I don't want to hang out with Argentinians. What about that?
Yeah, so I would say it's fine to have aesthetic preferences, but whether that's actual racism depends on how you'd answer the following question. Like, so you fall in love with someone, you love everything about them, you love their personality, you love the aesthetics, how they look and everything like that, you think they're beautiful, and then you find out they're a Harvard grad. And now, all of a sudden, you say, oh, now I'm not attracted to you anymore because of this arbitrary characteristic. So I would say that, you should, even in the dating market, you shouldn't base your decisions on some arbitrary characteristic like a racial label. But it's fine to have aesthetic preferences. If you don't like, if you don't like black skin, or you don't like curly hair, or you don't like red hair, or you don't like Harvard grads, some of that could be mere aesthetic preferences that are fine. But some of it, if it's just race, plain old race, then I think that is a kind of racism. If that's just an arbitrary characteristic, I didn't know you were black, now I know you're black, and now I don't like you anymore. That seems like racism to me.
All right, we're opening up to questions. Eric.
There we go. Hello. All right. As a currently elected politician, I need to do this disclaimer, right? Racism is bad. Okay, there's the disclaimer. I don't like it. First of all, I think it's very interesting that I've never seen a debate about whether, or even heard any debate about whether racism is compatible with statism, because I think we all know the answer to that, right? The statists throw all these labels at us, but we all know that their ideology is perfectly compatible with racial discrimination. As thousands of years of history bear out. So I suppose my question is, I think goes back to kind of the definition of racism and kind of how we conceive of it. I think I'm somewhat sympathetic to the thin libertarian argument. I know that, like, for me, I'm a libertarian, but I'm also, like, a lot of my ethics are informed by Taoism and Stoicism and the example of Jesus Christ and all these other things that have taught me kind of ethics above and beyond, don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. But of course, within libertarianism, there is that idea of the universality of human rights. Of course, I think that we stick to the negative territory of rights, negative rights, not the expansive positive rights that statists often put forward. So I guess to get to the question is, within the understanding and definition of racism, can someone be a racist without looking at someone of another race as having lesser human rights than they have? Yeah, is that a necessary component of racism, or can someone be a racist while still saying, but I recognize everyone has the exact same, rights to life, liberty, and property, and we should never infringe upon them?
I mean, it seems totally inconsistent. So if I think Harvard grads are subhuman, and they're like rocks or plants or something, why would I then believe that we should treat them as having libertarian rights? So if you believe that all human beings have the same rights, then we have this common humanity, it seems to me you also can't believe that any of them are subhuman and deserving disrespect, right? And so that belief in the universality of rights logically implies a belief in not disrespecting their moral dignity.
Yes, I always get a little bit nervous when people talk about rights, because I don't know if they understand what rights are. So I believe that correct rights actually stem from self-ownership. And if I can derive them from self-ownership, then it's a right. If I cannot derive it from self-ownership, if in fact it actually conflicts with self-ownership, it's not a right. So I would just say, can somebody be a libertarian and reject self-ownership in some area? I guess we have a lot of people who do that. And my hope for them is that they can actually get a little bit more universal over time. We have two different arguments for you're not a libertarian, right? The most common one is you're not a libertarian because you're not a libertarian conservative, or you're not a libertarian libertine, or you're not a libertarian Randian. It's that extra part. It's that thick part of that someone's added on. And so they're arguing the thick part without even understanding that they're arguing the thick part. And they actually kind of agree on the libertarianism. The other one, though, that's a little bit harder is you're a libertarian because you believe in self-ownership, except that you have a codicil. you have a few codicils. Well, not in this case and not in that case. I tend to be fairly tolerant in that area too. So, except with Harvard. I mean, he went to Yale, so we'll give him a pass, but he doesn't like Harvard either. So,
All right, thank you.
So I suppose my question is a little bit more directed towards Dennis. So if we assume that racism is kind of a scale, like you have people who are passively racist, like they, in their mind, they don't believe that minorities are equal to them or something like that. And on the more extreme spectrum, you have people who actively harass certain minority groups. And then you have people on the extreme end of the scale who, are so brainwashed by religion or whatever that they will actually take violent action against minority groups. So my question is, well, I guess to preface it a little bit more, if it's okay for libertarians to be racist quietly, if they use their own mouth and, like windpipes to express that they do not like a certain minority group, I personally believe that there's kind of a point during that scale of racism where that's no longer compatible with libertarianism, because if a racist group is kind of a minority, if like it's 2% of the population and all they do is sit at home and pout about how much they hate minorities and sleep with their sister, aunt, whatever, at that point in time, they're not really doing anything bad. But if that group starts to become less of a minority and they start to organize and they start to take positions, seek positions in the government to start decreasing the rights of minorities, or they even get together in groups to start actively harassing minorities, do you believe that there's a point at which racism is no longer compatible with libertarianism?
Yeah, the point where they started joined the government and started doing that, it would be that point, or if they went with and threw a Molotov cocktail, or yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you're using the violence of a proxy against them, then yeah, that's. But it's not the racism; it's using that proxy of government, and because it doesn't have to be race. I mean, we are incredibly cruel to other people for stupid reasons. For stupid reasons. We actually are seeing it now in New Hampshire, right? As we're getting more vocal, we're seeing more and more of the kind of the hardcore authoritarians be cruel to us. Mm-hmm. And some actually doing, getting close to threats. But there is a line. There is a line that violates self-ownership. Right. And certainly joining the government and using that against someone would be.
I should say that was an obvious example, but even if they get into a group and they start harassing minority groups online or spreading their opinions, especially to try to corrupt the youth and turn the youth against whichever minority group they dislike, would you consider that a violation of libertarianism? Because at the end of the day, they are using their mind and their words. It's their body, but they are tainting the society as a whole, and turning them against these individuals.
Yeah. No, I would not. I mean, I think that you'd have a case to go and talk to the platform owner and say, hey, these people are being real assholes. I don't think it makes sense to have assholes on. I think it makes sense to have a minority owned board that would be your own. I think it makes sense to separate. Have your free state project. I mean, if the people, I think it really makes sense to have a state that is actually all racist, and you just put them all in one place, and then and then everyone else could go, and it's just like, look, you don't have to fight everybody. You could be racist over here. So I actually love the separation idea, but no, I think that if someone expressing their own opinion, even if it might poison somebody, I think that more discussions is the right way to go.
All right, next person.
Hello. This question's for Jason. So that the question involves racism, and it sounds like you've been expanding racism in everything you said to pretty much include anything that we all agree is bad. I'm wondering, I don't know if you'd agree with that, but I'm wondering. A little bit closer. Oh, sorry, I thought it was too close. I'm wondering if you, if somebody said, let's have the same debate, but instead of racism, let's say people with children or anything else. We've had various examples. That fixed it. Is there any such debate like that where you replace racism with something else where you would answer differently? I don't know if I'm getting that across.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I think there is a misunderstanding there. So racism, I'm just understanding as treating someone worse because of their race. And I'm saying that that's wrong because it disrespects people's individual human dignity. There are other things, not racist things, but there are other things that also disrespect someone's individual dignity, like harassing someone, like telling your child to kill herself, like being ungrateful to a benefactor, right? These are all wrong things that disrespect someone's moral dignity. And we can have a debate about whether libertarianism is inconsistent with those things too, and maybe it is. So my point is simply that if you believe in libertarianism, that logically implies that you also should respect everyone's individual human dignity in other ways. Just as if you're a libertarian who really cares about liberty and it's the most important thing in your life, that also implies you should seriously consider moving to New Hampshire. It's not part of libertarianism, but it's logically implied by it.
So, sorry. I think, so what I'm getting from you, what it sounds like you're saying is that any behavior that makes a person a jerk needs to be incorporated into libertarianism.
No, the opposite of that. I'm saying if you're a jerk, it's inconsistent with libertarianism, but it's not part of libertarianism. Right? So there are libertarian jerks, just as there are people. Let's imagine you believe that the angles of a circle add up to 360 degrees, but the angles of a triangle don't add up to 180 degrees. It's logically inconsistent to believe both things, but imagine you do. There can be people like that, but it's nevertheless inconsistent to believe both things. In the same way, there are people who are libertarian racists. There are people who are, libertarian jerks. But it's inconsistent to act in that way if you believe this. You don't realize it yet, but we should educate you about that.
I'll leave right after this.
Okay.
If I'm against everybody who thinks tau is better than pi, am I not disrespecting his humanity? It seems like any bad behavior gets into that disrespect.
I don't know that. I'm not claiming that all bad behavior is constituted by disrespect. There might be some that is not, but I think that encapsulates a lot. So a lot of, when you think about what makes someone bad or what makes an action wrong, it usually involves disrespect for someone, even maybe yourself.
Okay, thank you.
Please speak into the mic. This is being recorded, so the YouTube can hear it. So please speak into the mic.
You have to forgive a somewhat long preface. Dennis and I have been arguing about this literally for years. I think the reason why you guys sound so much alike and are so congruent is that it's a reflection of, I guess, Mises' influence on the libertarian movement and the idea that, praxeology allows us to decide things a priori. I don't believe that's the case. I mean, compared to Dennis, I'm the graphene version of thin libertarian. I really think that libertarianism is living your life in such a way as to achieve a consent-based society, and that's it. And if I could give an example of what I mean about, the problem is for people like me who come to libertarianism through Hayek instead of Mises, we look at it more as a knowledge management problem. So by way of example, in 1986, I did my first business trip outside of the United States. I went to Tokyo. It was a phenomenally successful business trip. And I didn't even realize how successful it was until I'm literally walking into, Narita Airport to go home. Doors open up. I walk in. Every white woman in the place grabbed her purse. Now, if you've ever been to Japan, you know that I could grab a purse and fit into the crowd as easily as I could, disappear into this crowd. Fortunately, I had just read Knowledge and Decisions by Thomas Sowell, forward by Hayek, on the way there. So I bent over laughing hysterically because I realized that I hadn't just seen racism. I just watched a transaction in a knowledge economy. All of these women had independently decided that regardless of how attractive as I am, the threat was greater than whatever they would get out of being able to chat with me, because certainly I'm not going to go over and chat up somebody who's just grabbed her purse. So the example I would like you to both answer is this. Let's go back to FunSpot. FunSpot is here in New Hampshire, 98% white. Let's say that the owner of FunSpot, true libertarian that he is, notices that when buses full of black kids come by, they have greater damage done to the property, more problems, they have to call the police. So instead of barring the black kids, he's going to have Black Night and rely on the fact that his neighbors don't want to hang out with black people. So Thursday nights, they'll stay home. Is he being a racist, or is anything that he's doing inconsistent with libertarianism, given Dennis's bloated notion of libertarianism?
That's a good question, and so when I was thinking about this, what you're talking about is the concept of statistical discrimination, which I think is the best case for engaging in racial discrimination. Like that is the steel man argument for racial discrimination. You know nothing about anyone but that person's race, and you have to make a split-second decision about something. Then is it okay to discriminate on the basis of race? If I would say that if your statistical discrimination really is purely statistical discrimination, then you're not necessarily disrespecting someone's humanity by engaging in it. You're just making that split-second decision to, protect a legitimate interest, let's say.
But he's also relying on the a priori racism of the people who won't be coming.
Exactly. And so I think that makes this argument, this makes this different because it's not a split-second decision. You have the ability to do some vetting. You have the ability to go beyond mere statistical discrimination to understand, okay, what can I do to secure the premises and so on. And so in that case, I would say racial discrimination and racial segregation, as proposed here, are not justified. In the 99.9% of actual human interactions here, we know something more about a person than just that person's race. And so we shouldn't use race for statistical discrimination in 99.9% of cases.
Well, in terms of libertarianism, there's no issue here in libertarianism, right? It's his property and his body, and so this falls outside of libertarianism. Do you agree with that, by the way?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, good. So this and as a marketer, it sounds to me like a brilliant idea. Like I segment like crazy, and I think that's you do segments based on behavior that as opposed to demographics, and you're talking about something where you have a behavior linked to a demographic, and I think it would be absolutely fantastic, and I wonder if that wouldn't actually sell well, and you could see whether it sells. In terms of the, it just seems to me like a kind of a big win-win. I don't see a problem, but that's just because I'm a marketer and a libertarian.
But as you and I have discussed before, there's a spectrum that starts out at one end with in-group preference, and at the other end, let's kill all those people because of this arbitrary characteristic. It's a spectrum, and that's why I insist that it's a knowledge problem and not something we can make a priori decisions on. Let me give up the mic now.
Well, I do want to say that we have this thing in when I was in Chicago, right? You'd go to certain theaters, movie theaters, and some theaters it's an interactive event. Now those are black theaters, okay, and then other theaters everyone's quiet. You know, and it depends on which movie you want to see, right? Now, of course, you have Rocky Horror Picture Show. It's a different thing. But yeah, you know, I think that, you know, there are correlates that a good marketer would use. I don't see a problem with it.
Thank you.
Hi, question for Jason. Suppose I'm a restaurant owner, and as part of my hiring waiters and waitresses, part of my decision is based on physical attractiveness, because I know that my customers like a little eye candy with their meal. And suppose the town where I live in, I happen to know that people generally find Argentinians unattractive. An Argentinian applies for a job as a waiter or waitress, and I turn them down because they're Argentinian and therefore their eye candy value is lower. Am I being racist? And more to the point, is my action inconsistent with libertarianism?
Yeah, you need to know a little more information, but I think probably. And here's why. Because if you're making a decision, again, and this goes actually to the previous question, if you're making a decision purely on the basis of whether that person is Argentinian or not, then that's you're treating that person worse because of their ethnicity, purely. You need to do a little more research to understand, you know, how attractive is this person to my customers, right? She could be extremely attractive despite the fact that she's an Argentinian, right? So you're it is possible. So I think it's incumbent on you to do a little more research there and not simply use the heuristic that you have. You've got to do a little, you know, gain a little more knowledge to make a more accurate and rational decision. And if you don't do that, then I have to question, well, why aren't you doing that? It's clearly easy for you to do that. So you should.
All right. Thank you.
Hi, my question is for Dennis. So given as libertarians, in New Hampshire, we want more libertarians to move to New Hampshire and want to maximize freedom, at least on the strategic level, isn't racism incompatible with libertarianism in terms of claiming that like racists are libertarians? Or another example, you know, if the country was full of Harvard graduates and someone's going around saying, take the smartest person from Harvard and move them to MIT and you'll lower the IQ of both schools, wouldn't we want to not claim them as libertarian, regardless of if they are a libertarian?
Yeah, so this is more in the area of marketing, but yeah, I would concur with you. I think that you know, that different groups will want to market differently, and they'll want to actually, you know, if in fact what you want is you want to attract people who are not racist, then you want to signal hard that you are not racist, and that would make good sense. You know, so yeah, I mean, but these are good. These are marketing questions. So yeah.
Hi, this is more towards something you said earlier, Jason, but feel free to jump in, Dennis, if you feel you have to, I guess, you know. But earlier you made a comment about the apparent inconsistency between, you know, someone saying, yeah, I'm for everyone's rights, everyone should own themselves, but I really don't like Group X. And just, you saw kind of a discrepancy there. Well, I'm a dog lover. I absolutely loved my Golden Retriever growing up. They're great. They're great dogs. Web toes, great swimmers, really sweet. My buddy had a Border Collie, absolute genius. It knew over 1,000 distinct words. They are brilliant animals. They can run all day, outrun a horse, fantastic. But I personally would never want to see those two dog races mix. I'm anti-dog races mixing. I would be very upset if someone was beating a Golden Retriever in the street. I would, at the minimum, be very, very angry. Same for a Border Collie. I respect their right to not be abused, if there is such a thing for an animal. But I am, in fact, anti-dog race mixing. Would that not make me a dog racist who does support their bodily autonomy?
Yeah, so you've assumed that you believe in dog rights, right? So you said dogs have a right to bodily autonomy. Nevertheless, I think so. You actually said you're opposed to dog mixing, which I'm not sure is dog racism as we've defined it, right? So dog racism would be I'm going to treat some dogs worse because of their breed. And so I would say if you think that all dogs have rights, and nevertheless it's okay, some are sub dog, some sub canine, some dogs we can mistreat, but all dogs have rights. I would say that is a logically inconsistent position. Someone could believe it, but you shouldn't believe that because there's a logical inconsistency between the two beliefs.
We got a few more minutes. Anybody else have any questions? You have any questions more for each other? Okay. Let's go to closing arguments. You got 5 minutes, Jason. Let me set the timer here.
I'll stand. Get the juices flowing. I've been sitting too long.
You're ready? Go ahead.
All right. So we should define libertarianism in a thin way. Libertarianism just means something like you've got to respect other people's rights. Don't hurt people, don't take their stuff, non-aggression principle, self-ownership, however you want to do it. It should be something thin like that. But libertarianism, so non-racism is not part of libertarianism. It's not part of the definition of libertarianism. But it's something that is logically implied by it. In the same way that if you are an enthusiastic libertarian for whom liberty is the most important thing in your life, you should at least consider moving to New Hampshire, right? It's a logical implication. That doesn't mean that you should consider moving to New Hampshire is part of the definition of being an enthusiastic libertarian. It's an implication of it. And so I would say, I'd ask Dennis in his closing statement to address this. Is it inconsistent to be an enthusiastic libertarian for whom liberty is the most important thing, and yet not even want to consider moving to New Hampshire? And if you think that's inconsistent, then you at least understand the concept of how two things can be inconsistent because of a relationship of logical implication, not because of a relationship of self-contradiction in the definition, right? So it's inconsistent to believe that circles have 360 degrees when you add up the angles, and that triangles don't have 180 degrees when you add up the angles. That's inconsistent. But obviously, the fact that triangles have 180 degrees when you add up the angles is not part of the definition of a circle having 360 degrees, right? We should have a thin understanding, a thin definition of circles, and nevertheless understand that logical implication that, well, if you believe that circles have 360 degree angles, you should also believe that triangles have 180 degrees. So I would say it's inconsistent to be a libertarian who believes in the universal rights of all people and yet say, oh yeah, but Filipinos are subhuman. We can disrespect Filipinos, but we should still respect their rights. But we can disrespect them in other ways. That, to me, is logically inconsistent. And you might be able to make it logically consistent if you have a really weird understanding of libertarianism, but under common sense understandings of libertarianism where we come to libertarianism because we believe all people have individual human dignity that must be respected, then that implies libertarianism, but also implies some other things. Those other things are not part of libertarianism. We need that thin definition of libertarianism, but they're logically entailed by it. I guess I would just drive home that point that I would rather that racists be libertarian than authoritarian. But I think it is an inconsistency, and it could go either way. Like, if you're a racist libertarian, you might not stick around being a libertarian, because if you think some people are subhuman, it's okay to mistreat people, maybe eventually you say, okay, it's okay to violate their rights too. And if you go the other way, if you say, okay, everyone is human, everyone has rights, I should respect everyone's rights, they have strong dignity that we should all respect, then I think you're going to end up giving up on the racism, right? It's very, very hard to maintain those two things at the same time because there's a logical inconsistency there. So yeah, I would say it's inconsistent to be a libertarian and to act in a racist way. That there's an inevitable tension there. All right, your mic, Dennis.
I think your basic argument is that it's inconsistent to believe in the dignity of other people and not be libertarian. The conversation today has been about whether racism is consistent or inconsistent to libertarianism. And I've made the case that libertarianism is primarily an ethical movement that results that rests on one essential human right, self-ownership, and that we are trying to define and reduce evil. We've gone through the aspects of the definition of racism: prejudice, discrimination in thought association, labor and trade, and antagonism. We've noted that because libertarianism is the ethic that you alone fully and exclusively own your own body, that you may ethically use your body to think, associate, labor, trade in racist ways. And that would be consistent, but not necessarily approved by libertarianism. And so therefore, racism as defined by the Oxford Dictionary is consistent with libertarianism, which is the resolution that we're talking about. Only when racism motivates you to violate someone's self-ownership do we have something inconsistent with libertarianism, but that the violation is the act, not the thought. Now, we haven't said whether racism is moral or not, whether it's the act of a good man or a not good man. Only that issue is above the bar of evil violation of self-ownership. Libertarianism plays a very narrow role and setting that minimum bar where so that everyone knows where evil lies. We are trying to get everyone over that minimum bar, when almost everyone everywhere throughout history has operated beneath that minimum bar. So we have a tough job. The morality of racist thoughts, that's a question that arises above that bar. And so it's just, we have to focus here, guys. Hand that off to other philosophies. We can't be everything. Our job is to teach humanity to stop going below that bar. Stop violating self-ownership. Stop hitting people. Stop stealing. Just stop. And that's something that's going on by the billions every second. It's systemic. It's what causes mass murder, diminishes futures, impoverishes us, robs us of joy. So libertarians have probably the most important task in the world. And if we promulgate this ethic, we will have done the greatest service to mankind of eradicating the lazy countenance of systemic evil. The small unkindness, the lousy behavior, the rudeness, the being an a-hole, that's just not libertarians' focus. Just as keeping up your lawn, tipping your hat, and opening doors for others. If libertarians were to focus on these niceties, those infinite issues would quickly distract us from what should be our laser focus, because no one else is doing what we're doing. Now, of course, you could be a libertarian Christian, a libertarian Stoic, a libertarian conservative, a libertarian progressive, a libertarian Randian, a libertarian virtue ethicist. The libertarian part of that tells me that you are committed not to do evil. And that's frankly the most important thing I need to know about you. But it doesn't tell me really what type of man you're trying to be. And so that you need that second part to tell me what you're going to be. So please vote against the resolution, because we need everyone to become libertarians, not just the not racists, but especially the racists. We want them to become libertarians. We have lots of other philosophies that can tell us how to be nice to one another but only one that holds that bar universally against evil. Do not distract us from this most important goal. Thank you.
Give it up for them. All right. Please, if you have not, go and vote. If you have not, go and vote yes, no, or undecided. And the one that changes the most votes will win the debate. We'll announce that once those get counted. So please, if you have, especially if you voted first, I really recommend those people to vote, I guess. So if you didn't vote to start, please do not vote. But if you voted at the beginning, please vote. And once those are tallied up, we'll announce the winner.
A few minutes later.
Disagree with the resolution. Dennis's negative side started out with about 79.2%, and agree started out with 8.3%. So disagree went from 79.2% to 81% for a 1.8% increase. So his disagree increases by 1.8%. Agree started out with 8.3%, but increased to 19% for a 10.7% increase. So therefore, Jason is the winner. And Jason, we have your gift. It is a Gatorade protein bar chocolate chip. So this is the winning trophy. So congratulations.